I know what you're thinking. Miriam has already faced so much, and things can't possibly get worse. But trust me, what's coming next is going to shake everything she thought she knew about her life, her faith, and the man she once trusted. It's in this moments of confusion and fear that Miriam starts to uncover the truth, and with each discovery, her world begins to unravel. So let's dive into part 2, where the lies deepen, the secrets grow darker, and Miriam's courage will be tested like never before. Her heart nearly stopped. There, lying on the bed, was Pastor Charles, next to a young man, perhaps no older than 19. The boy was laughing softly, his shirt partially unbuttoned, and Pastor Charles lay beside him, looking far too comfortable. The sight was like a punch to the gut, a visceral confirmation of everything she had begun to suspect, but couldn't bear to believe. Miriam gasped, unable to contain herself, and the young man immediately sat up, his face turning red as he fumbled to fix his shirt. Pastor Charles looked up, his face frozen in shock, before he quickly pulled himself together and gave her a smile, a hollow, chilling smile that made her skin crawl. Miriam, he said, standing up and moving towards her, this isn't what it looks like. She backed away, her eyes wide with disgust and disbelief. Charles, what, what is this? She stammered, barely able to get the words out. Pastor Charles took a deep breath, adopting an expression of calm, almost fatherly reassurance. Miriam, I can explain. It's a prayer session. A prayer session, she repeated, her voice trembling with anger. On our bed with a young boy? He sighed, reaching for her hand, but she pulled back. Yes, Miriam, he's a struggling member of the congregation who needed guidance. We were praying together, that's all. But the young man's face said it all. He looked mortified, ashamed, avoiding her gaze as he muttered an awkward goodbye and quickly slipped past her, disappearing down the hall. Miriam watched him go, her mind racing, her heart pounding as the realization hit her full force. The pastor had lied, deceived her again, and this time his lie cut deeper than ever before. I don't believe you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. This isn't the first time, is it? Pastor Charles' face softened and he dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands reaching out desperately. Miriam, please, don't let this come between us. I made a mistake, yes, but I was trying to help him. You know how much I care about the youth in our church. She glared down at him, disgusted by his audacity. This has nothing to do with the church, Charles. You've betrayed me, and worse, you've used the church as a cover for your lies. But Pastor Charles wasn't finished. His face contorted with a mix of fear and regret, and in a sudden, unexpected gesture, he wrapped his arms around her legs, clutching her as if his life depended on it. Please, Miriam, he begged, his voice thick with desperation. I don't want to lose you. I promise I'll change. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance. For the next few days, Pastor Charles seemed like a different man. He was attentive and loving. He even cooked her breakfast in the mornings, set the table for dinner, and even bought flowers, small gestures that were completely foreign to their marriage. Miriam couldn't help but feel unnerved. This sudden change felt forced, insincere, as if he was trying to manipulate her back into submission. But what disturbed her most was his behavior in public. On Sundays, during the service, he would call her to the pulpit, holding her hand tightly as he delivered his sermon. Speaking of the strength of marriage, of love and devotion, the congregation watched as he extolled her virtues, calling her his rock, his guiding light, and declaring that he couldn't do the Lord's work without her by his side. His grip on her hand was almost painful, his gaze intense as he spoke, and Miriam felt trapped like an unwilling performer in a show she never agreed to. The congregation ate it up, of course, murmuring words of praises, marveling at their pastor's faithful marriage. But Miriam's insides twisted with a mix of anger and betrayal, knowing it was all a facade. She felt like she was drowning in his lies, and every time she tried to pull away, he found a new way to ensnare her. The congregation noticed the change, marveling at the transformation in their pastor's marriage. They watched as he held her hand during sermons, kissed her on the cheek between prayers, and even surprised her with small bouquets of flowers before she would take the stage to sing. It was as though he was a new man, his eyes warm and loving, his demeanor that of a devoted husband. To those who once whispered about their tense relationship, Pastor Charles' public display of affection seemed like the sign of a deeply loving union. And it wasn't just for show. At home, he was equally attentive, cooking for her, helping her around the house, and in a surprising turn, bringing a newfound passion into their marriage. Nights were no longer lonely. Instead, they were filled with intense moments of closeness, moments that left Miriam feeling truly loved. For the first time, she let go of her suspicions and doubts, allowing herself to believe that maybe he had changed, that maybe the man she had always dreamed of loving was finally there. It wasn't long before she found herself completely swept up in his whirlwind of affection. She looked forward to his touch, his laughter, his voice filling their home. The months rolled by in a blissful blaze, and Miriam began to feel that they were finally united in their marriage. She had almost forgotten the fear and suspicion that had once consumed her, and every day she woke up feeling more certain of their love. Some months passed by, and Miriam began to feel dizzy, nauseous. Then one morning, she decided to take a pregnancy test. She held her breath, watching as the lines appeared, her heart racing with a mixture of shock and joy. She was pregnant. She couldn't believe it. A child, their child, was growing inside her. She knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chance for them to start afresh, to be the family she had always dreamed of. When she told Pastor Charles, he beamed, pulling her into his arms and kissing her forehead. "This is a blessing, Miriam," he said softly, his voice filled with a warmth that melted her heart. "Our child, I can't wait to be a father with you by my side." But happiness has a way of masking the truth, and Miriam was about to learn that not all blessings were what they seemed. One evening, a few months into her pregnancy, she was resting in the living room when she overheard Charles' voice from the study. He was on the phone. His tone was low and urgent, and something in his voice sent a chill down her spine. She approached the door quietly, pressing her ear against it, her heart pounding as she caught bits and pieces of his conversation. "Yes, yes, I know, but she's just a cover, that's all," he was saying, a hint of impatience in his tone. "I had to do this, okay? There were too many people watching, too many questions. A pregnant wife is the perfect answer to keep everyone's attention off me," he said. Miriam's blood ran cold. She strained to hear more, her heart racing as he continued. The words were cutting her like knives. "Look, I'll be honest, I don't love her. She's nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient way to keep my reputation intact," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I can't risk it, not now. The baby? The baby is part of the act. The whole family man routine. You have to understand. People would never accept who I am, who we are. So I had to be careful." There was a pause, and she heard him chuckle. "You know, you're the one I care about. This thing with her is just a facade. I'll see you soon." Miriam stepped back, her mind reeling, the walls spinning around her. She stumbled into the hallway, clutching her stomach, feeling as though her world had shattered into a thousand pieces. All the love, the attention, the affection, it had been nothing more than an elaborate lie, a carefully constructed facade to protect his reputation. And the baby, their baby, was nothing more than a prop to him. Pastor Charles emerged from the study, his face softening when he saw her standing there. "Miriam," he said, his voice tender, as though he hadn't just destroyed her world. "Are you all right? You look pale." She forced herself to meet his gaze, her own filled with a quiet fury. "I heard you, Charles," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard everything." For a moment, his expression faltered, but then he quickly regained his composure, stepping towards her, his face twisted into an insincere look of concern. "Miriam, you misunderstood." "No," she interrupted, her voice firmer. "I heard exactly what you said. I'm just a cover. This baby, our marriage, it's all a lie." His face hardened, and for the first time, she saw the true nature of the man before her. Gone was the tenderness and affection. Instead, his eyes glinted with coldness that sent a shiver down her spine. What do you want me to say, Miriam? He sneered. You knew what you were getting into. You've known for a long time. You're here to play a part, nothing more. The truth hit her like a wave, and she took a step back, feeling the walls closing in. I trusted you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I thought, I thought this was real. He laughed, a bitter, mocking sound that echoed through the hallway. Real? Miriam, you're more naive than I thought. This is a role, a game. You were so desperate to believe, so willing to fall for anything I said, but you were never more than a cover, a distraction to keep people from looking too closely. She felt tears prickling her eyes, but she held them back. Her jaw set in determination. I won't be your puppet, Charles. Not anymore. He smirked, crossing his arms. And what are you going to do, Miriam? Run to the congregation? Tell them I'm not the perfect husband? You know they will never believe you. The revelation that Pastor Charles was using her as nothing more than a cover had left Miriam shattered. She felt betrayed and her heart ached with the knowledge that her husband, the man who claimed to be led by the Lord, had deceived her in the worst possible way. The love, the affection, the public displays, all of it had been a lie. And now she was carrying his child. A child conceived not out of love, but as a calculated move to secure his false image. But with her heartbreak came a fierce determination. She remembered the chilling photos of his first wife, Sarah, and the way Charles had dismissed her suspicions as irrelevant when she first brought it up. She could no longer ignore that feeling that there was something dark about Sarah's death, and if her suspicions were correct, then her own life and that of her unborn baby could be in danger. One evening, feeling suffocated by the weight of it all, she went out for a walk, craving the fresh air and the silence that existed outside the walls of their home that now felt like a cage. She spent hours wandering, letting her thoughts settle until finally she decided it was time to go back and confront Charles. She needed answers, no matter how painful they might be. But as she approached the house, she stopped in her tracks. The porch light was on, and through the open doorway, she saw Pastor Charles standing just inside, his face twisted in anger as he argued with a man she recognized instantly, Mike, his friend from the congregation. She slipped quietly to the side, pressing herself against the wall as she listened to their heated conversation. Are you insane? Charles hissed, his voice filled with fury. We agreed we'll meet at the usual place. Do you have any idea what could happen if someone saw you here? Mike's voice, low and defensive, replied, I had to see you, Charles. This wasn't part of the plan, was it? Getting her pregnant. What were you thinking? Charles scoffed, shaking his head. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be tied down with a child? It was a necessary evil. The congregation was getting suspicious. People were talking. This was the only way to keep them from questioning me. Miriam's blood ran cold as she listened, her heart pounding so loudly she feared they might hear it. She pulled out her phone, trembling as she hit the record button, her hand shaking as she held it close to capture every word. Mike continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. But don't you remember what happened with Sarah? She figured you out. She threatened to expose everything, your secrets, us, and look what happened to her. Miriam stifled a gasp, pressing a hand to her mouth. She felt her stomach churn as she listened every word, a horrifying revelation. Charles let out a bitter laugh. Yes, well, she didn't leave me much of a choice, did she? One wrong step and she was gone. You pushed her too hard and she hit her head, and that was it. Erased every trace of what she knew. It was the only way to protect myself, to protect us. Miriam felt bile rise in her throat as the truth sunk in. Sarah's death hadn't been an accident. It had been a murder, orchestrated by the very man who now called himself her husband. And if he did it once, she had no doubt he was capable of doing it again. She clutched her stomach, feeling a fierce protectiveness for the child growing inside of her. She wouldn't let him hurt her or her child. She had to get out of this nightmare, and she needed to make sure he would never do this to anyone else. Just then, Charles' voice broke through her thoughts, cold and calculating. I have everything under control, Mike. Miriam is so clueless, and she will do exactly what I want her to do. And if she doesn't, he trailed off, his silence sounding more chilling than any words he could have spoken. Miriam slipped away, her heart pounding as they continued their conversation. She was trembling, but she forced herself to remain calm, her mind racing as she carefully made her way back to the safety of the neighborhood's main road. She had the recording, the evidence that exposed Chelsea's lies, his crimes, his murderous past. She had everything she needed to finally bring him down. The next morning, she took the recording to the police station, her hands trembling as she handed it over to the police. She recounted everything: his manipulation, his affairs, his plot to keep her in line by getting her pregnant, and most importantly, his involvement in Sarah's death. The officers listened, their expressions growing more serious with each passing moment. They assured her that they would investigate thoroughly, and within hours, they had issued a warrant for Pastor Chelsea's arrest. That Sunday, as the congregation gathered, they were met not with the sight of their pastor at the pulpit, but with the flashing lights of police cars parked outside the church. The congregation watched in shock and confusion as Pastor Charles was led out in handcuffs, his head lowered, his face pale. His secret, his double life, had been laid bare for all to see. Miriam stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as he was driven away, a sense of relief washing over her. For the first time in months, she felt free, her heart unburdened by the lies and deception that had once weighed her down. She knew her life would never be the same, but she was ready to face it, ready to rebuild and to move forward without the shadow of Pastor Charles looming over her. As the weeks passed, more information surfaced, shocking details about Charles's double life. It was revealed that he had been embezzling funds from the church, funneling it into secret accounts that he used to support his hidden relationships and lavish lifestyle. The news spread quickly, the scandal rocking the community to its core. The man they had trusted, the man they had called their leader, was nothing more than a charlatan, a manipulative predator who had used his position to hide his crimes. Pastor Charles was convicted of murder, fraud, and numerous other charges, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His lover, Mike, was also implicated in the cover up of Sarah's death and was sentenced to serve time as an accessory to the crime. With Pastor Charles behind bars and his dark secrets finally exposed, Miriam felt a freedom she hadn't known in years. The weight of fear and betrayal had lifted, and for the first time, she could envision a future unclouded by lies. But she knew staying in the same town, surrounded by memories of her old life, would only hold her back. She needed a fresh start, a place where she could rebuild without the shadow of her past lingering around every corner. Miriam made a bold decision. She would leave the country. She had a distant aunt in Canada who had always encouraged her to visit, offering a place to stay and promising that Miriam would be welcomed with open arms. With her aunt's support, Miriam made the necessary arrangements, packed her belongings, and left the only life she had ever known. It was difficult saying goodbye to her friends and familiar faces, but she knew it was the only way to truly begin again. A few months later, Miriam gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Emmanuel, meaning God is with us, a reminder of the strength and resilience that had carried her through even the darkest of times. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of love and peace, a profound joy that washed away the remnants of her past heartache. Emmanuel was her miracle, her new beginning. Life in Canada was a fresh chapter. Miriam settled into a modest but cozy apartment, finding joy in the simple routines of motherhood. She enrolled in online classes, working towards a degree in counseling, determined to help others who had endured the kind of pain and betrayal she had experienced. She dreamed of opening her own practice one day, a place where people could find healing and support, just as she had. As the years passed, Miriam watched Emmanuel grow into a bright, curious child, his laughter filling their homes with warmth and light. She often marveled at how far they had come, grateful for the quiet, steady happiness they had found. Her journey hadn't been easy, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient, ready to face whatever the future held. Hey, my viewers, thank you for staying to the end of this video. And to all the strong, independent women out there, keep being cautious and keep being aware. And remember that your happiness is worth fighting for. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you on the next one.